Hi, my name's John Gray.
I'm Roger Levy. Welcome to HomeTruths.
Today we're announcing a couple of items that we had foreshadowed previously. We were exploring as a government. Today I'm here to announce that we have committed as a government to proceeding with those two, which are both around self-certification.
Over the years we've dealt with thousands of defective homes throughout New Zealand and the pain and suffering that's caused. So we're going to pick up on some of the highlights of what Minister Pink has announced in relation to the proposed changes to the Building Act.
For those who are building relatively straightforward typologies, simple buildings, and B, the professionals, the tradespeople themselves and the building companies are able to be trusted to do that work, we think that they shouldn't be dealt with in the same kind of lowest common denominator way that is more appropriate for higher risk building typologies and also less experienced practitioners.
I mean, the first four words, allowing trusted building companies.
How do we assess that?
Yeah, how do we
who's trusted?
Who do we find who's trustworthy in these processes? A good example of a trusted builder was the former national president of the Registered Master Builders Federation, who has allegedly defrauded 3 customers in starting to build houses, not finishing them, and spending all the money he's received from them on other things. Now, he was a guy that ought to have been trusted and turned out to be a bit of a rogue.
We know that there are thousands of houses of a relatively straightforward design that are built every year in this country that could be achieved much more quickly without needing inspections and consenting from building consent authorities or councils.
And most of these group housing companies, the volume housing companies, have got standard designs basically, haven't you? Now, you might be able to move things around a little bit, but overall they've got a standard package which you can buy. And so it kind of fits, it works okay.
The thing about those volume builders as well, they're building low risk properties. They're focused on building low risk properties because they don't want them to fail, and so those companies are limited to maybe 2-story. They're not building great big high rise multi-story construction, which in itself is a whole nother story, because the failures in that environment are just eye-watering costs to repair. And they're designing out some of these really high-risk features with parapets and internal gutters, and their properties don't have those because those have all been proven to be high risk of weather tightness particularly, and so they're not in their designs. So the product they're producing is a lower risk product than you might get if you went to an architect who was going to was probably more focused on form than function.
Yes.
And design you a beautiful home that then is very difficult to build and make perform.
I'm confident that in fact there will be a role for private building consent authorities in conjunction with some sort of public sign-off through local government.
The provision for private building certifiers was introduced in the Building Act 1991, and the then national government was heralding the fact that we're going to make building cheaper and faster because we're introducing competition between the council and these new private certifiers. But that was a failed experiment, right, Roger?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because particularly here in Auckland, but other parts of the country as well, where most of those private building certifiers are found to be not up to standard, and the defective buildings that we were helping consumers with over that time, it was very distressing to find at the end of the day that there was no man left standing because the private certifiers didn't have the mandatory insurance that they were supposed to have. And so the consumer, in our first documentary we made, Mr. and Mrs. Harris, their house completely demolished because it was built so badly, and the failed inspections, or the inspections that should have been failed, and the consenting that was done, which was defective, was by a private certifier, and there was no insurance there at all. So the developer was liquidated and bankrupted, the builder was liquidated, and other tradies couldn't be found. And so they were up for the build or rebuild of their home by replacing the whole house.
Yeah.
And so the private certifier thing is dependent, you know, again, it needs that safety net of an insurance policy, but it needs run-on cover. So the run-on cover would operate if the company closed down, whether it liquidated or not. The run-off cover would be there for, you know, to provide the 10-year warranty under the implied warranties, you see. So it would be there to respond to that.
And what safeguards are in place?
Yeah, the safeguards are basically along the lines of what we've heard from the industry, but also in terms of consumers and matching the points that are made by insurers in their comfort levels. So it's about track record, it's about experience, it's about qualification, being licensed building practitioners, registered plumbers, drain layers and so forth, subject to the discipline of the respective occupational boards under statutory guidance or requirements actually, plumbers, gas fitters, drain layers board for example, and of course any kind of licences for self-certification would be subject to ongoing requirements that they have, that the quality assurance frameworks that they've told us are in place are in fact working well.
If the people involved, and particularly the Minister, was fully exposed to the pain and suffering that failure has caused, which we see every day, he'd take a different approach. Well, maybe he wouldn't, because it needs a long-term focus, not a short-term political cycle focus. But it gives you a real appreciation, and you know, the stats are such. If just coming in and looking at the things that we've had to deal with over the time we've been doing it, that should be enough.
We're really confident that these will be game-changing moves to make the building industry more effective.
It's difficult to see how any of that is going to reduce the cost of construction.
No.
And any of it is going to decrease the number of failures that we're having to deal with.
Correct. I just wonder how far they're going to go in terms of expanding again the whole private building certifier.
We have to keep a pretty close eye on that, because that's very risky.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.